Tackling climate change and reducing import dependencies on depleting fossil fuels are the two ends of the energy transition spectrum. Finding and deploying green alternatives is not a choice anymore, but a compulsion for all major economies today.
Europe's largest economy, Germany, and the world's fastest growing economy, India, need to collaborate in finding meaningful solutions to enable frictionless energy transition.
And that will be the focus of the first playoff of the day, develop versus developing. The green dilemma, how green is green really? Is it lip service or affirmative action? What's the role that the developed world can play to assist emerging economies in their journeys to growth with minimum carbon emissions?
Playoff begins.
And let's get ready for the first playoff of the day. We have a stellar panel of speakers for this session. Let me invite upon stage Rahul Munjal, CMD Hero Future Energies, Vibha Dhawan, DG TERI, Professor Dr. Andreas Bett, Director Fraunhofer, ISC, Dr. Julian Hochscherf, ESG and Sustainability Manager, HEP Solar, and we have Peter Hartmann, Management Board Member, Pre-Zero. And for this playoff, the match referee is my colleague Padmaja Joshi.
Hi, good morning. So we have a slightly different format at the summit here. Since we are in a football city, we are going to be doing this as a sort of match. I'm going to be the referee. You're all subject matter experts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by telling our audience here a little story. So at the beginning of this year, and especially people from India will identify, I'm Padmaja, by the way. Hi, Padmaja. And I'm going to be moderating this session. In January this year, we had the consecration of the Ram Mandir, which is, of course, very sacred to people in India. And the first announcement that the Prime Minister made soon after the consecration of the Ram Mandir happened is that he's going to install, our country is going to install solar panels on 1 crore rooftops across the country. The reason why I tell this story is because it speaks of the importance that green energy is given in the country. So you have a civilizational moment that has been consecrated in Ayodhya, and then you speak about the future of the country. Keeping that in mind, we also have this struggle happening between the developing and the developed world. So to kick off proceedings, I want to first start by asking Ms. Vibha Dhawan. You know, we are coming off on the back of COP29. Now, I'm going to ask questions purely from a layperson's point of view. The impression is that the developing world often has to shoulder the burden of what the developed countries are already doing. All of these meetings, these summits that we have globally, has that managed to address the imbalance?
Well, as we all know, COP meetings are held every year, and there are serious negotiations where the government's representatives are there and they discuss about what is climate change, how are we moving, and what needs to be done. Now, over a period of time, it has become very clear that we are making promises in terms of last year it was loss and damage fund and implementation of that. But then the money which is committed never comes on the table. So it's very clear, but the message or why the COP still remains very important is that the developed part of the world has reached certain stage of development in terms of greening their procedures as well. Like, for example, when we talk of cross-boundary carbon tax and other things, it is that the developed part has technology. They can adopt that. But that doesn't mean that the developing part of the world starts paying perhaps as taxation for their development. So what we are looking at, or the importance of COP, is that the governments are sitting over there. First of all, they need to appreciate what is going to become very important in years to come. What is it they are thinking? Because the changes are not made overnight. They talk about that this will be implemented from 26, 27, or in next 5 years. So therefore, the preparedness or governments understand what they should be doing. And the second important part is that as they have combined voice of developing countries, that then they say what they cannot implement and what they can implement. It's very clear that the kind of financing we require is not coming. And maybe it would be wrong on the part of developing nations even to accept that to some extent. But what is more important is let at least there be flow of technology. It's very clear, like if I talk at the international level, I don't think so. There are critics which was 10 years back, that we all used to say, is climate change a real threat? But today we know, yes, it is a threat. And it's much the uglier than what IPC reports predicted. And therefore, we have to act in that direction. Now, the developed part of the world also has to realize that there is only one planet to live in. So let's not worry about IPRs. Let's not worry about, I developed the technology, so what I'm getting in return. They should be more towards, this is only one planet, let me share, because if developing part of the world is not clean, I cannot be clean either. It's something like COVID, it's going to spread. So therefore, they have to be careful.
When you say the money is not coming, who are the defaulters there?
It's everyone. You look at the commitment which was made perhaps in every COP. It's not even 10%. Yes, we are spending money on the name of climate change, but maybe that's only to have meetings. It is not really saying that I'm going to give you soft loan. We are not asking for subsidy, but even the interest rates for the developing part of the world from international financing companies, it's much higher than what they give to the developed part of the world. So how do you expect where the capex is going to come from? So that the financing in that part also becomes important.
Professor Bett, but do you think the gap between intention and deliverables still hasn't been plugged just as yet?
I mean, I'm coming from research, so we are looking always forward. And we heard, God, we need money at the end. And our research is devoted to reduce the costs. I mean, look back 10, 20 years ago, solar energy was much too costly. So due to research and innovation, we are now in a situation that we have a source of renewable energy, and we have, in addition, wind and others. But it's important to look that we bring down the costs, that we can do a financing. And I agree with that. We need, in a certain way, a financial structure to really make it happen. But we must also look into the future. And that is why I really liked what you mentioned. We should look in the future and not look back what was our fault in the past. Because developing countries are in some better shape, actually, to start with new technology, whereas the developed countries sometimes are very heavily struggling with old stuff and are not ready to proceed fast enough. So in my perspective, we try to work in a cooperative way to bring it in the whole world. And I think everyone here in the room can actually also start and contribute in a small way to reduce our carbon emissions. But we need technologies, and we need to develop that, and we put that in a financial framing. That's important, that we can make really business out of that. And I think in the past we made a lot of mistakes, we know that. We use our air and environment as waste for CO2. We didn't pay for that, and now we have a mess. So now I think we have to restructure the financing. CO2, paying for CO2 emissions would be one relatively easy way to go. That makes it more expensive for developed countries, for example, and push them to go faster into renewable world. So that is my really advice to do that, but we have to do in parallel also developing new technologies and make it even more cheaper. One important sentence to mix it up, because changing all our energy system, all sectors is really challenging. It's very complicated. We look in all the different sectors and we see that this intermittent dependencies that will change our thinking. And this is something which is very, very difficult, which we find from research, to bring that into the mind of the people. That the old world is gone, we have to look forward. And this is a challenging part we have to do, and look into that we have a holistic approach for our energy supply in the future.
Everyone has the realization, Mr. Munjal, that we need to look to the future. I was looking at our budget document. Speaking for India, we had a huge outlay. We had the Prime Minister Surya Yojana, like I mentioned. He said 1 crore solar panels we need to put. But then you have a new US president who's saying, I'm going to drill, drill, drill. How do you look into the future when you feel, here we are, putting our shoulder to the wheel, and then there is the world's largest democracy, which is saying, we're going to drill, drill, drill. So you're pushing us 3 steps back. How does that work?
So he's actually saying drill, baby, drill. So it's not drill.
I wasn't sure that would be apt for this audience.
Yeah. So this is not the first time he's been the president, right? He was the president earlier as well. And I'll come to that in a little bit. But you must understand, for me personally, I'm a climate optimist. I know there's a problem. I know the world is probably already at 1.4. But I know if we spend some money, the biggest form of carbon emissions is the grid, is energy. Of course, transportation is another hard-to-abate sector, is the third, right? But for the grid, today we have solutions in wind, solar, and battery storage, etc. So there is technology, it needs to be used. Now, last year, the world commissioned or added 530 gigawatts of renewables. We're sitting in Germany today. German grid, if I'm not mistaken, is 250 gigawatts only. So we added more than the German grid to the world. So the world is spending money, and a lot of momentum is already there. So while he was the president last time around, Texas became the largest, I think, solar as well as wind producer in the US. So how much of a negative impact will he have? I'm not sure. There will be a negative impact for sure, but will it be to the tune of our fears in our mind? I don't think so. I think we sometimes overemphasize the importance, while he's very, very important, don't get me wrong, in any way or form. But we underemphasize the importance of the rest of the world. While the rest of the world understand what needs to be done, they understand we need $1 trillion every year. That's what they're talking about in COP today. I don't know how successful it will be, but we'll know in the next couple of days, I guess next 24, 48 hours. But if we're talking about to the tune of $1 trillion a year, it's going to come from all parts of the world. So I am, like I said, a climate optimist. I think we should be wary. I hope sense will prevail and he'll do the right thing. But the rest of the world will continue to do what needs to be done.
So you think a lot of this could also be political rhetoric, and in reality, like you mentioned the example of Texas, the reality is a shade different from what is said in the election campaign?
Always. Always.
Good to know that it's not limited to India alone. All right, my next question. Again, some data about Germany. Germany's electricity supply, and the share of renewables in electricity has steadily grown over the last few years. The data which I was reading was that it was from around 6% in 2000, and it has grown to 38% in 2018, which basically means that they had a target of 35% for 2020, and that has already been reached. So 57% of Germany's electricity is now covered by renewables. What I want to ask our next speaker, Peter Hartmann, what I want to ask you is, how was this made possible?
Well, it's made possible by legislatory change, actually, that really pushed us very hard in that direction. But to be honest, this gives, for us in the industry, also a lot of problems. The electric matrix of Germany is changing with a lot of problems for the industrial companies. But what we do need, I think, to make that change happen, because I'm also a climate optimist, but I think we have to do a change. So what we need is a stable, we need stability in the nets, and we need a clear government, we need clear regulations of where to go to. That's, I think, the most important thing. We all know we have to change. And also when you ask about Trump, I think it really doesn't matter what they do in the US, because we have to act. We have one planet, and we have to act now. But and I can even understand that it's really difficult to get the right legislation, to get the economic suspects to move in that direction. So yeah, to answer your question, it's a big step forward, what we have achieved here, but still, to be honest, I think it's also a painful change that we are living right now in Germany, but there is no alternative in my point of view.
Why do you call it a painful change?
Because a lot of capex is necessary, and a lot of times still when we burn fuel, gas, whatever, it's still cheaper than having solar, a good solar industry, than having wind. We have to remake all the nets, so it's a lot of capex involved. The cost of energy in Germany is, I don't know if it's the highest, but with the highest in the world, which is causing a lot of problems for our industry, for the chemical industry, for example. So we are making our cost of living, our cost of production a lot higher to battle against climate change. And this, of course, is very challenging to the German industry.
But don't you think there'll be a pushback? At some point, the industries are going to push back and say, sure, you're out to save the world, but our economy will collapse. Our industries are going to bear the brunt of your climate optimism.
I think that's a very big discussion in Germany, that we say, well, we're a pretty small country. What does it change if we change? But it's one planet. I mean, there is really no alternative, and we are all sitting here. I think no one has a different opinion. We have to act. We heard the speech about green energy. That's the way to go. But it's a difficult way.
It's a good example to have said, and I will come back to you, Mr. Munjal, on that. What is the acceptability in India? But before that, Dr. Julian Hochscherf, this whole thing between the developed world and the developing economies, is there now a consensus that you cannot have large countries or large economies bullying the rest of the world into matching up or into contributing greatly to the climate goals while not being as good or as great a contributor themselves?
I mean, my perspective on this topic is that in Germany we speak much too often about the 2% that we contribute in greenhouse gas emissions per year. What we should rather speak about is our historical responsibility for CO2 emissions, right? So our welfare is based on historical CO2 emissions. So this is why we have to not hide between these 2% that we add annually to global CO2 emissions, but we have to take responsibility for the historical emissions. This is what leads us to this debate of increasing the share of renewable energies, to think or rethink business models, to think about circularity in business models, to think about how to integrate biodiversity protection measures, because there are links between sustainability topics, and it's not just about CO2. It's about so much more if you speak about a sustainable transition and transition of business models. So you have to make the step from linearity in business models to circularity in business models. And also for the solar industry, for the renewable energy industry, this is true in order not to make the same mistakes again that you have been doing in the 1950s when you relied on, or when you build up your wealth on fossil fuels. So this is really like, from my perspective, the main responsibility that we have to take, and we are taking this responsibility in the global north, not in the speed that is needed on a global scale to solve issues on a global scale, but we have to take the decisive steps on that journey.
Would you care to simplify that further? What do you mean by a circular model?
I mean, of a circular model, I'm speaking that Germany, for instance, is not a country that is rich in raw materials. So we rely on still importing much of the resources that we need also for the green energy transition. What I particularly do in my daily work is really to think about how can we get that business model circular? How can we recycle solar modules? That's really a decisive issue or a decisive step in that business model that you have to take, because then you're really getting independent. Right now we are just running into the next dependency, and we just have to think about how can we fuel the resources that we need for our business model, not just in Germany, basically in every country that is using renewable energies as well. Also in India, you should really have a plan of how to regain the resources that are included in the components, because it's possible from a technical perspective, but you have to do it from a commercial, or you have to make it feasible from a commercial perspective.
And that brings me to the question I wanted to ask you. We are looking at a model, but isn't that the next step? First, we talk about the acceptability. Among businesses, among the common people, do you think that renewable energy has got that kind of acceptability that would be needed for your business, for example, to be largely profitable?
Yeah, so let's talk about the developing world. And even in developing world, India has a very unique situation. So there is India, and let's call the lesser developing world. Let's break that up into two different parts. In India today, there is in both the developing worlds, there is a dire need for poverty alleviation. That's our first and foremost goal. First is everybody needs to be fed 3 meals a day, nutritious meals, and good health care, period. That cannot be second to any other goal. So while that's the goal, India today is energy starved. Mind you, India has got a target of 500 gigawatts, 50 gigawatts a year. That's one of the largest targets in the world, third largest renewable energy target in the world. So it's not that India is not going to do its renewable energy bit. It is, but it needs more energy. That's why it's going to continue to build fossil fuel plants for another 3 or 4 years. I think 2030 or 2035, I'm not sure when we've drawn the line. But because we need energy, because our first goal is poverty alleviation. First goal is food, hunger alleviation. That's one. Then there are countries in sub-Saharan Africa, etc., for whom cost of renewables is still far greater than the cost of fossil fuel, because they have access to oil and gas, or they have access to thermal. So for them, it's a completely different question there. What do you do there? What is fair? Something that was said earlier. You take into account how much emissions were put in by what country in history, not the 2% this year. And if the conversation goes to that, it's a very, very different and a very mature conversation, rather than what's happening this year alone. So, I want to stop there, but I want to draw the distinction between developing India as a more developed country than the other developing countries. I hope that comes out. You understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'd like to add one thing. I think we have to think in steps, right? We have to see where's the potential to lower the emissions, and there a big potential, I think, in every country that is less developed are landfills. I think that is something that's completely missing in the discussion. Where we have landfills with untreated waste, they emit a lot of methane, which is a lot more hazardous to the climate than CO2. And this is, I think, a real easy leverage that we have if we better the situation, well, I'm saying that because I'm from a waste management company, but still, if we change the way we treat the waste, if we have better landfills, then we can also already and very easily do a lot to lower emissions without talking about fossil fuel, without talking about big capex. So I think that's a really easy and a close-by step that we could achieve.
Ms. Dhawan, do you find all of these different aspects being addressed in India right now?
Yeah, in fact, it's very interesting. Like, first of all, one thing which was said that each one of us is contributing to climate change and I should know what I'm doing. And the movement, Mission Life, which is led by Ministry of Environment and Forest under leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, that actually talks about what is my own carbon footprint. So it's lifestyles for environment. So, and it is also what gets mired perhaps gets managed. The other is in India, all the listed companies, they have to give their ESG reporting. And that's another step towards that, how responsible I am towards environment. The fact that each one of us is realizing that climate change is real and we can't continue, humankind cannot survive with this kind of emissions. We all are going to be responsible looking at how responsible the company is.
Ma'am, may I interject and be a little blunt? You spoke of individuals being made to realize their own carbon footprint. I remember about a couple of months ago, the Indian Minister for Road Transport and Highways, he said that anyone who has diesel vehicles, they're going to be taxed into the ground. And there was such a huge outcry. Everyone said that you are ruining industry. You know, you think that you can just bulldoze everyone. Is there really a realization? I mean, the mission is great, but individually, have people really...
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. And we also have to realize that India is a very, very price-sensitive market. And that also holds true with Bureau of Energy Efficiency when they talk about rating, 5-star rating for the best of the equipment. Now, if I have spent 40,000 rupees on buying an air conditioner and it's perhaps 3 grade or something, and they tell me that these are outdated and everyone has to shift to 5-star, I can't do it. And same holds true for diesel vehicles. When we brought the diesel vehicles, it wasn't that they have life of 10 years. So if you bring it in between, and again, we are doing a mistake, we are not looking into how good the vehicle is. We are basically looking at the age of the vehicle and we are not doing the life cycle analysis. How much of carbon footprint is there to manufacture a new vehicle? So we are missing on that. And we also have to see, do we have the alternatives available? Today you say electric. We don't have the electric infrastructure fully. Tomorrow it will be hybrid and maybe 5 years down the line, we are only going to have hydrogen. Who knows the way hydrogen develops? So therefore, it is also like, for countries like India, we have to make that transition little slow. The other thing which is very important for India is, like, if I look into your and my carbon footprint, perhaps we'll be as good or as bad as Europeans and Americans. It's only our average goes down because energy excess to many in the rural was not there. In many cases, it's still not getting mired because they're using firewood. So our carbon footprint, and let's realize as the economic status improves, you first invest on energy. And therefore, it's going to go up dramatically, it's going to go up. What we need to do that, it's a challenge, but I see more as an opportunity. Let's look at India. We had no fossil fuel. And being an energy-starved country, our development was comparatively slow. Every drop of fossil fuel was to be imported. But today, if we look at the cost of production of renewable energy, it is much cheaper than Europe. And therefore, because we have so much of sunshine. And let's also realize, and that is where when the Honorable Minister spoke, he was discussing about partnerships. And that becomes extremely important also for the development of technology. The technologies which have been developed for large entrepreneurs, large companies are not suitable for India, which is a country of small and medium enterprises. It's 65% of your production comes from SMEs. And if they are not cleaned, you cannot be clean. And therefore, you need to co-develop the technologies. And that's where the partnership with Germany becomes extremely important. The new education policy in our country now that talks of dual degree programs that will give you an opportunity to have common PhD students and they develop the technologies to the stage which is required by SMEs. It may not be the best, it may not be suitable for very large companies, but it's suitable for them. So co-development of technology also becomes important.
Professor Bett, if one thing both countries could take away from each other?
I think that is one thing which we certainly can take together is that we have to lower our CO2 emission. And the way is to do that, I think, is a little bit different. But I want to take up what was just mentioned, to cooperate. That's the way to go. We have our strengths, and there are strengths in India. And if we combine that, we are successful in the business and make money. At the end, we have to be honest, it's always about money and cost. And we heard nicely before that they have already 24 hours, 4 cents per kilowatt hour. We are talking in Germany in the best case for 7 cents. That makes a big difference if you go in manufacturing. And for example, we have projects transferring our know-how. For example, we have developed a solar cell architecture called TOPCon, which is now the major architecture used in China. We transfer that currently to India to build up production lines for solar, because we need huge materials. And that is also something we are looking into. Life cycle assessment was mentioned. And that is why we look in circular economy, how we can design modules in a way that we can recycle it after 30, 40 years lifetime. How we bring back the material. We need really billions of tons, because we have to exchange all our system. And in a certain point, we will be limited by copper, because we go to more electricity. We know that already, and we are looking for substitute that and make better technologies. One important point, we set up in a university master's program, Sustainable System Engineering. We have a lot of students from India now with us, educating in our institute. They go back, some stay also in Germany actually, to continue. And that is something we can do together, both countries, because we need at the end knowledge and education to implement and to transfer, and transfer also the mindset of the people.
Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful session. I really wish we had way more time. I don't think that's a problem or discussion. We can, get into one discussion alone. But thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us. A huge round of applause. Thank you.
Our panelists to be here, and we want Mr. Reuven Kasper and Mr. BC Tripathi to come and give them a token of our appreciation. Thank you. Madhur. Mr. Tripathi, stoles as well, sir. There you go.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.